Hola a todos, a través de este video vamos a hacer un repaso sobre los temas relevantes que se abarcan en la unidad 3b. Prácticamente la gramática está dividida en dos videos diferentes. Este video, por su parte, presenta un repaso sobre los mandatos formales primero, después hablaremos sobre los informales y concluiremos con la forma de nosotros para algunos mandatos. Muy bien, pues para comenzar es importante hacer un pequeño repaso sobre los mandatos formales. Recuerden que la formalidad se va a expresar no solamente en la forma de usted, sino también en la forma de ustedes. De tal manera, para nuestras tres conjugaciones, tanto AR como ER y también IR, tendremos conjugaciones o morfología limitada. Como podemos observar aquí, tanto ER como IR compartirán los mismos paradigmas, tanto A como AN. A para la forma usted, AN para la forma de ustedes. La forma AR, por su parte, tendrá las terminaciones E en la forma singular y en la forma plural. De tal forma, vamos a tener algunos ejemplos justamente aquí. Entonces, cuando vemos esas conjugaciones de la forma AR, vamos a notar esta E como terminación en los siguientes ejemplos. Entonces, usted tome, usted apriete. Apretar significa to squeeze. Usted cuente. Este es aplicable tanto en contextos cuando le pedimos a alguien que nos cuente, que nos diga una historia. Tell me a story. Either that or is also applicable to ask someone to count an object, such as count the money. Cuente el dinero. Cuente a los estudiantes, etc. Tenemos también nuestros ejemplos en la forma ER, en la forma IR. Para ER tenemos comer, poner, volver. Así tendríamos usted coma, por ejemplo, coma saludablemente, ponga y vuelva. Finalmente, con ejemplos de IR, tendríamos escriba, pida, duerma. Es muy similar, como podemos ver, esta E se va a volver a repetir en la forma de ustedes. Sin embargo, va a estar acompañado también por una N. De forma muy similar, vamos a ver también aquí la aparición constante de la A, acompañada, por supuesto, de una N por la forma plural. Muy bien, tenemos aquí algunos ejemplos, tanto en la forma afirmativa como en la forma negativa. Sabemos que en la forma negativa vamos a ver la oración acompañada con elementos como no o con elementos como nunca, es decir, todos aquellos que expresen alguna negación. Así tendremos: tome la medicina en comida. O bien, no tome la medicina sin comida. Even when these two sentences seem to be completely different, they are really expressing the same message. So go ahead and take your meds with or within your food, or please avoid taking your meds without food. Entonces, como podemos ver, la idea es la misma, sin embargo, la forma de expresarlo es diferente. Tenemos la misma circunstancia en esta otra oración. Nunca tome la medicina sin comida. Es It is very similar to the second sentence. Now, the only difference is that you're emphasizing the fact of completely and absolutely avoid under all circumstances to take your meds without food. Therefore, you will have never take the medicine without food. Tenemos, por supuesto, como siempre, que prestar muchísima atención a los cambios que existen en la forma de escribir. Sacar, de esta manera, to take out. Secar, to dry. Y marcar, to mark, or also to dial, as in when you make a phone call. Entonces, por ejemplo, tendríamos en la forma de usted, saque, por ejemplo, saque la basura, take out the trash. A comparación de la forma plural, saquen la basura. It's the same command, but in the plural form. So that means that you're requesting more than one person to carry out the same action. In this case, to take out the trash. Entonces, para secar, saque, saquen, marcar, marque, marquen. For instance, for a group of people that will be in an emergency situation, you would suggest marquen, si necesitan ayuda de un médico, marquen al 911. Muy bien. What is important to observe here is that all these verbs are examples of change in terms of spelling, going from CAR to QU, which is going to be followed by an E. The reason why this change is implemented is so that you can still keep the K sound. Similarly, you will have changes of endings like GAR to C, which is going to be followed by an E. In this way, you will have tragar, colgar y pagar. Todos estos verbos siguen siendo verbos que comparten la misma terminación, es decir, AR. Tragar, to eat, but to eat very quickly and in very big amounts. Trague, traguen. Cuelgue, cuelguen. Pague, paguen. Tenemos también un cambio muy similar en la terminación zar con z, el cual va a cambiar también similarmente a los ejemplos que habíamos visto aquí a la forma C. De igual manera, vamos a ver que una E es lo que le precede. Así tendremos empezar, cruzar, adelgazar. Empiece, empiecen, cruce, crucen, as in, for instance, cross the street. Cross the street carefully. If you were referring to a single person that you can use informal speech with, then you would say cruce la carretera. If, however, your recommendation will be directed to a group of people, then you would say crucen la carretera cuidadosamente. Cross the street carefully. Adelgazar, to lose weight. It's a very similar example that is within the same category. Tenemos, por supuesto, también formas irregulares de los mandatos. Remember, we're still covering the informal ones. In that way, we'll find verbs like ser, to be, ir, to go, saber, to know. As you can see, these changes are way more unpredictable. In that way, we will have sea, sean, vaya, vayan, sepa, sepan. También vamos a pensar en los verbos estar y en los verbos dar. De esa manera diría usted esté. Entonces, de ser así, le estoy pidiendo a alguien, por ejemplo, que ponga atención. Usted esté atento. Pay attention. Ustedes estén, mientras que para dar tendría usted de, ustedes den. Por ejemplo, ustedes den lo mejor de sí mismos. Give the best of yourself to a group of people, of course. Como podemos ver, la forma de dar para usted es muy similar a la preposición of. Para hacer una diferencia en el significado, vamos a necesitar de un acento. De esta manera, se está refiriendo al verbo to give, ¿cierto? Entonces, dé mis saludos a su madre, por ejemplo. Muy bien, no podemos olvidarnos de los mandatos informales también. Entonces, al revisarlos, nos vamos a dar cuenta que los utilizamos para no solamente dar una orden. The fact that they are called commands do not necessarily mean that you're using this conjugation in order to give someone an order. It is also used very commonly in order to give a suggestion. Now, since they are informal, we will have to bear in mind that we will use the to form. As such, we will have our three basic conjugations: ar, ir. Or as a matter of fact, our basic infinitives. So, we'll find our endings: a for ar verbs, e for er verbs, and also e for ir verbs. Now, we'll have here some examples. Let's focus first on this part, the informal command. We have examples with AR verbs, examples with ER verbs, and examples with IR verbs. To cuenta, remember that it could either mean to tell, it's a request for someone to tell you something, or to count something. For instance, cuenta el chisme. Tell us the news. Tell us like the gossip, for instance. Limpia, for instance, limpia tu cuarto, which will be a command that parents use quite often, especially when their kids are young. Aprieta, to squeeze. Y tenemos nuevamente aquí cuenta. I believe it's an error. It was supposed to reflect a different verb, but we have already covered that. So for now, let's just keep going. Tenemos los ejemplos en la forma ER. Mueve. Entonces, por ejemplo, when you are moving to a new place, right? And there is a box in your way, you will probably tell a friend or ask a friend to move that box out of the way. Mueve la caja, por favor. I would like to mention that the fact that they are called commands doesn't mean that they cannot be used in situations where you're requesting something politely. Just like the example that I just gave. Mueve la caja, por favor. Move the box out of the way, please. Just by adding por favor, you are already emphasizing that you are doing it, you're requesting something in a polite manner. So, corre. Por ejemplo, if you want to complete a marathon, it's important that you run every day. Si quieres completar un maratón, entonces tienes que correr todos los días. Corre todos los días, therefore, will be a direct suggestion. Lee, mueve, repite, duerme, comparte, share, duerme. Muy bien. Ahora, what it's important to notice here is that all these conjugations are similar to those of the present indicative. Limpia, aprieta, corre, lee, comparte, repite. Then what's the difference? Well, the difference is that all these conjugations in the present indicative will correspond to él, ella, y usted. However, remember that the present indicative is used to describe what someone does on a regular basis as a habit, for instance, or a routine. So if I would say, él limpia su casa. What this implies is that on regular basis, he cleans his house. However, informal commands are used in order to express an order or a suggestion. Therefore, these conjugations are not applicable to él, ella, usted, but rather to the to form. So please avoid any confusions there. As you can see, if I use these conjugations directly with someone, that is a command, not the description of a habit or an action that is carried out on a regular basis. If I would want to describe what you do on regular basis by using, of course, the present indicative, then I would say, tú limpias tu casa. So please notice the difference there. Okay, that's why we have these one conjugations, these combinations or conjugations in order to match it with the to form. Because bottom line, they are commands, that is, they are orders, they are suggestions, they are requests. We have here an additional example for you to see in context the difference, right? So let's start with this sentence. El doctor entra y Carlos saca la lengua para él. Let's look at the translation here. The doctor enters and Carlos sticks out his tongue for him. The reason why it is in the present indicative is because, first of all, I am describing what Carlos does, right? Therefore, I am describing what a third person does. He, that is, él. So I could replace Carlos with he. And I could say, the doctor enters and he sticks out his tongue for him. In English, this little s will allow you to know that you're using the present indicative. So, as such, I am describing what he does as the doctor enters. However, if we take a look here at the example with the informal command, we'll realize that it is the doctor, the one that is talking to Carlos directly. So, when the doctor enters in the room, he will say to Carlos, "Hola Carlos, saca la lengua por favor." Therefore, the equivalency in English, "Hello Carlos, stick out your tongue, please." As you can see, it is a request and the doctor is making it formal. So we can see the difference here too. It's important to bear in mind that we will have irregular forms in the affirmative form. These conjugations, since they are irregular, will be not as expected in terms of form as we would think. They are more unpredictable. Therefore, what we can do is simply memorize them. I wish that there was an easier way, but the reality is that that's the best route. Then, for tener, to have, our affirmative form of the to command will be ten, venir ven, poner pon, salir sal, hacer haz, ir ve, decir di, ser sé. Muy importante aquí, it is the accent mark, the one that will make your audience, when you write a message, it is the accent mark what will make them realize that you're referring to the verb in its command form as opposed to the reflexive, for instance, the reflexive pronoun, or the direct or indirect object for that matter. Negative commands, be careful here. In the to form, when you have a negative command, your endings will change. For AR verbs, it's going to correspond to S. For ER verbs, it's going to correspond to AS. And IR will be shared with those ER endings, ER infinitives. As such, you will have the following conjugations. Tú no tomes, no aprietes, no cuentes, no comas, no pongas, no vuelvas, no escribas, no pidas, no duermas. En la forma negativa, también vamos a tener irregularidades en la forma de escribir nuestras conjugaciones. De tal manera, para sacar tendremos no saques, no seques, no marques. Todas ellas cambiando de CAR a QU y por supuesto seguido de E. Para aquellos que terminan en GAR, tendremos el cambio de GU seguido por una E. Para los que terminen en ZAR, tendremos ahora una C seguida también de una E. Así, como podemos ver, they are the same verbs, right, than the previous examples when we went over some changes in spelling. Ahora, fíjense cómo ese CAR, it could be a little bit more predictable because it is similar, although not all of them obviously are going to be the same. These are important changes to bear in mind. So let's just review very quickly the conjugations. No saques, no seques, no marques, no tragues, no cuelgues, no pagues, no empieces, no cruces y no adelgaces. Tendremos también que explorar y tener en cuenta que vamos a tener mandatos informales que cuando los utilizamos en la forma negativa van a ser irregulares. Esto por supuesto que agrega un poco de complejidad, pero es importante tenerlo en cuenta para que cuando lo utilicemos lo hagamos de forma efectiva. Como podemos ver, tenemos la misma base de verbos. So they are exactly the same ones that we went over or that we covered when we explored the formal comments. Sin embargo, nuestras conjugaciones aquí tendremos no seas, no vayas, no sepas, no estés y no tes. No need of an accent mark this time, at least not in that. But we do need it, however, for estar. Although you may have not explored this form before, it is important to know that the commands also have a conjugation for nosotros. In English, it will be the equivalent of adding let's. Let's study together. Estudiemos juntos. Let's do another example with the ER form. I know that my ending will be amos, while those verbs that end in IR in the infinitive form would also share that same conjugation. Let's think of the verb comer. Para comer. Si pensamos en el ejemplo, let's eat a burger, entonces tendríamos comamos una hamburguesa, ¿cierto? Ahora, pensemos en un ejemplo para el infinitivo IR. Un verbo básico, vivir. If you will be able to pick the state where you could live, where you could move to, your ideal state. For instance, in my case, I really like Texas. If I could, I would live there. Actually, the closer to the border, the better, since I still have family in Mexico. So, if someone, for instance, my mom, would ask me, where do you want us to live? I would say, let's live in Texas. Therefore, I will tell her in Spanish. Le diría, mamá, vivamos en Texas. I'm sorry for my handwriting, but I have limited resources here. So, even when you might have not seen them before, among native speakers, this kind of command, it's very common to use. Something to bear in mind that adds a little bit to the level of complexity of the nosotros command is the fact that you will find stem changes in some verbs. As such, for verbs like seguir, to continue, sentir, to feel, pedir, to request, you would expect to have the following conjugations. Sigamos, sintamos, pidamos. For verbs like dormir and morir, those stem changes will be the following ones. Durmamos, muramos. Although it is a very strange example, it might be used by native speakers. For instance, in very colloquial language, I will give you the example in just a second. Let me just finish writing it, since it is an example of a sentence that it is very out of the ordinary. If I would say, oh, let's go to a restaurant so that we do not starve. Vayamos a un restaurante. No muramos de hambre. So even when the verb seems to be very odd, because you would think, well, I will probably never say let's die. But as you can see, it will be used more than anything in very colloquial ways to use the language. I hope this helps. Remember that it is very common to find in general spelling changes. So here's a little bit of a reminder of some of the ones that we have already seen. In the usted, ustedes, and two forms. The original endings of the verbs are the same. C-A-R, G-A-R. However, the changes that you would expect will be the following ones. Saquemos, sequemos, marquemos, traguemos, lleguemos, paguemos. Some other examples would be rezar, cruzar, alcanzar. Y así tendríamos también el cambio de Z a R a C. Recemos, crucemos, alcancemos. Ahora, hay que tomar en cuenta también los mandatos que son irregulares, incluso en la forma de nosotros. Como pueden ver, son exactamente los mismos que hemos cubierto antes: ser, ir, saber, estar y dar. Para la forma de nosotros, sin embargo, tendremos seamos, vayamos, sepamos, estemos, demos. Es muy común también que para la forma de ir utilicemos vamos, for let's. So, vamos a estudiar. Let's study. Vayamos a estudiar. Let's study. Cualquiera de los dos sería aceptable. Now, the good news is that for most verbs, as you can see it right here, for most of them, whether you conjugate it in the affirmative or the negative form, you will have no difference in the conjugation. That way, you could say, llamemos, por ejemplo, Rubén is not feeling well. Let's call a doctor. Rubén no se siente bien. Llamemos a un doctor. Maybe someone will answer, actually, let's not call a doctor. Let's call 911. De hecho, no llamemos a un doctor. Llamemos al 911. So, as you can see it right here. So remember, for most verbs, regardless of what kind of infinitive they belong to, whether you use it in the affirmative or the negative form, in nosotros comments, there will be no change in the conjugation. Be careful with ir, however, in which case, in the affirmative form, you will have vamos, whereas in the negative one, you will always have vayamos, right? So remember, I said you could use either vayamos or vamos in the affirmative form, okay? This is very common among native speakers. However, for the negative one, you will always have vayamos. You will never say no vamos for a command. Of course, that combination is possible in the simple present. No vamos al gimnasio muy seguido. We don't go to the gym that often. Now, the use of the language is completely different though, since it is in the present tense of the indicative, you are simply, stating that you usually don't go to the gym, whereas these examples apply to commands in the nosotros form, of course. I hope this has been helpful. This is the first part of the grammar, and in the other video, I will cover the remaining points. I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.